When you think of the horrors of World War II, a few names probably jump right to mind, right? Well, today we're diving into this explainer to look at the chilling, true crime history of Adolf Eichmann. This guy wasn't a battlefield commander. No, he was the bureaucratic architect behind the scenes. We're going to see how his logistical actions literally shaped one of humanity's darkest chapters, transforming horrific ideologies into a structured, terrifying reality. 5 million. Just pause and think about that number for a second. That is the staggering human toll lost under the direct, logistical oversight of a guy who was, honestly, unexpectedly ordinary. It really forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. How on earth does a seemingly average, middle-class citizen become the primary engineer of mass extermination?
To figure that out, this explainer is going to trace his life chronologically. We'll cover his role as the Holocaust's architect, his rise in the SS, how he engineered mass murder, his escape to Argentina, the legendary Mossad manhunt, and finally, his trial and justice.
All right, let's start with part 1, the Holocaust's architect. So, contrasting the sheer, unimaginable scale of his crimes, this man actually had incredibly mundane beginnings. Born in 1906 in Solingen, Germany, he was raised by a devout Calvinist Protestant father. Now get this. He actually went to the exact same secondary school in Austria as Adolf Hitler, just 17 years later. But Eichmann, he dropped out. He learned to play the violin and kind of drifted through odd jobs. He even worked in his dad's mining company for a bit before eventually finding his dark purpose.
Which brings us to part 2, his rapid rise in the SS.
Fueled by the economic crash of the Great Depression, his totally ordinary career took a really dark turn. I mean, in 1927, he was literally just a district salesman for the vacuum oil company. When he got fired in 1932, he joined the Austrian Nazi branch. Fast forward to 1934, and he finds his niche in the SS Jewish department. He actually studied Hebrew and Yiddish just to deeply understand the community he was targeting. By 1938, as a first lieutenant, his whole job was organizing forced mass emigration, and he managed to displace 100,000 individuals. But the policy was shifting, right? From forced emigration to sheer displacement and extermination. He was appointed head of the Jewish Emigration Command at the newly formed RSHA, and his logistical power just skyrocketed. To really grasp the cruelty of his logistics, well, in October 1939, he ordered tens of thousands of people to be deported to Poland, abandoning them in areas with absolutely no food or drinking water. Roughly 5,000 people died just from this calculated deprivation. Moving right into part 3, engineering mass murder. This is the absolutely crucial turning point where his bureaucratic mind turns mass displacement into a systematic machinery of death. He essentially broke genocide down into cold, calculated operational steps. First, seizing property to fund the regime. Second, forcing populations into tightly packed ghettos for slave labor, specifically to save the government money. Third, he weaponized the railway system, calculating exactly how many humans could physically be packed into train cars. And finally, under Operation Reinhardt, routing those trains directly to extermination camps. You know, this wasn't battlefield combat. This was terrifyingly desk job genocide. Look at these numbers from the peak of his grim efficiency in Hungary in 1944. He was managing 4 trains daily, deporting 3,000 human beings to death camps every single day. And here's a really dark irony for you. Later that same year, he received a second-class Iron Cross for safely extracting 10,000 German hostages from the Hungarian border. Yet, just mere weeks later, he mercilessly forced 10,000 Jewish people on a brutal 210-kilometer death march. Okay, let's look at part 4, escape to Argentina. As the war ended and Germany surrendered in May 1945, the architect of this whole horror realized he had to vanish. He definitely didn't face the music. He ran. He actually traveled to Berlin first to burn every single document detailing his operations. He was briefly captured by U.S. troops, but get this, he used a slightly tweaked fake name, Otto Eichmann, and totally slipped through the cracks. Bouncing around under various aliases for years, he incredibly secured a Red Cross humanitarian passport, and in 1958 sailed off to Argentina to live a quiet life as Ricardo Clement. But he couldn't hide forever. Part 5, the Mossad manhunt. The survivors obviously never forgot, and it was the smallest, most random slip-up that unraveled years of hiding. So a Jewish German survivor named Lothar Hermann was living in Argentina.
His daughter, Sylvia, happened to start dating a young man named Klaus Eichmann. Klaus would actually brag about his father's powerful Nazi past. Suspicious, right? Sylvia went to Klaus's house, and the guy who opened the door was the fugitive himself. This total accident gave Israeli intelligence the exact thread they needed. After Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion ordered his capture, alive, importantly, in 1960, 4 undercover Mossad agents literally grabbed him off the street and began stripping away those fake identities. Under interrogation in a safe house, he stubbornly clung to the name Ricardo Clement. Then he cracked just a little bit, offering up his old alias Otto Henninger. But finally, faced with agents who clearly knew everything, he completely broke down. He gave them his precise hat and shoe measurements, his old SS batch number, and confessed he was, in fact, Adolf Eichmann.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 6, Trial and Final Justice. Smuggled out of Argentina and held under intense security in an Israeli police station for 9 months, Eichmann finally faced the world in 1961. And man, the Jerusalem District Court became an absolute global spectacle. Public anger was so incredibly intense that they had to put him inside a bulletproof glass booth just to prevent assassination attempts. Prosecutor Gideon Hausner brought forward over 100 documents and 112 survivors, completely laying bare the true human cost of Eichmann's spreadsheets and train schedules. Now, the core legal battle of this trial really came down to his level of authority. His defense lawyer basically tried to frame him as this powerless, low-level employee, just a transport manager following government orders. But the prosecution absolutely dismantled that argument. They proved he wasn't just sitting at a desk stamping papers. He personally visited the killing sites. He was fully aware of the horrors, and he was an active, enthusiastic master planner of the whole genocide. And if there was literally any doubt about his guilt or his remorse, the prosecution dropped this chilling quote from 1945. In court, Eichmann tried to backpedal hard, claiming he was only talking about enemies of the state. But the judge pressed him, and he was forced to openly admit on the stand that his enemies meant the Jewish people. That single quote basically destroyed any illusion that he was just some unwilling bureaucrat caught up in the system. Found guilty on multiple counts of crimes against humanity, the architect of the Holocaust finally met his end. He was sentenced to death in December 1961 and executed by hanging on May 31, 1962. Looking back at the life of this school dropout who systematically engineered the deaths of millions, we're left with a really heavy, vital question to close out this explainer. How do we ensure the world never again allows the mundane, everyday machinery of an ordinary bureaucracy to mask such extraordinary evil?